Okay, so here we have the Middle Kingdom, and I'm going to say that, we are just going through this extremely quickly. There were many different kingdoms, and these are broken down into even more parts. So I'm just going through the three big general ones, which are the early, middle, and the late kingdoms. There's a video here if you want to watch about the Middle Kingdom, gives you a little bit more historical information. But let's dive into some of the art. So here we have an image of one of the pharaohs. This is the head of Sanuset the third, and Sanuset ruled circa 1836 to 1818 BCE, and he was from the 12th dynasty. This is yellow quartzite. Quartzite is also a fairly hard stone. And as I said, these things last because they were made of this very hard material usually. Well, this one has gotten, beaten up over the time. It has a lot of damage to it. We can see from the bottom of it how the bottom is rounded here like this, that it was actually attached to a larger sculpture at one point, and this is the head. You'll also notice that the ears, the top of the ears and the nose have quite a bit of damage on it. And one thought is that when one pharaoh died and a new pharaoh came into power, they actually believed that the Ka, the spirit of the old pharaoh, was living in these sculptures. So the new pharaoh would go and they cut the nose off of the old pharaoh. Sometimes they topple it over and stuff, so that the Ka was disturbed, and then they were like the new rightful pharaoh, and they had all the power. That could be what happened here. We really don't know. It could be raiders that knocked it over. No clue. But let's look at this a little bit more in detail. So we have up here, we have the cobra, the deadliest snake in Egypt. So again, just like the pharaoh that had his head and the body of the lion, the cobra was used as a symbol of power because it was so strong and so deadly. So you'll often see the cobra on the forehead of the pharaoh, on his crown. We then see, his ears are very large, and they look like they've been pushed forward like this. Well, why would you do that? If you can't hear something or you want to listen closely, you maybe do this. And in fact, that's what he's showing the gods. He's showing the gods that he was a really good listener, and that's why his ears are shown this way, kind of pushed forward and oversized. Then you see under his eyes kind of bags. He looks kind of tired and older. So he also wanted to tell the gods that he worked really hard being a pharaoh. He tried his best to be the best pharaoh that he could be. And he was wise, and he did a good job, and that's why he looks a little tired. And the other thing to say about this is these all would have been painted. So when you look at this, you see he has like no forehead and forehead. He has a forehead, no eyebrows. So, but they would have been painted. They would have pupils, and the eyes would have been painted. Okay, so know that. The next thing, we're going to jump through this really quickly. We have a lot to cover. So this is the New Kingdom. And the New Kingdom then is our last kingdom of ancient Egypt we'll get. And again, I have a video here if you want to go through that a little bit more. But there is one pharaoh in particular that I really love, my favorite pharaoh of all time. And this is the depiction of that pharaoh. This is in New York City at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And if you walk into the main door of the Met and you go to the right, you will come to the Egyptian section. If you go all the way through the Egyptian section, in the back corner, there is a whole room dedicated to this pharaoh. Why? Why is this pharaoh so important? Well, take a minute and look at this pharaoh. this pharaoh is not shown as being super strong looking, like they've been working out. So why is that? Well, the story is that this is a Hatshepsut, and this was one of our few female pharaohs. So what happens is her husband dies, and then she becomes like the interim pharaoh. And which was totally something that happened all the time. She was supposed to remain pharaoh until the eldest son was old enough to rule, which happened to be her stepson, because again, the pharaoh would have multiple wives. But what happened is when he came of age to rule, she said, no, I'm not giving up my position here, and they co-ruled. So in all, she ruled for about 20 years, and she was a really good ruler. She helped, it was a fair one. It was fairly peaceful, not a lot of war. She helped expand the empire, set up trade routes. And here, this piece was made for her temple. So she's shown here kneeling. And if you look at the feet here, it's not a comfortable position for the foot. So you wouldn't be able to kneel like this very long. And she holds two containers here. She's making an offering to the gods. Then, this is a typical statue that would have been made of a male pharaoh. So when she asks, like, make an image of me, they're like, well, how do we do that? So what they did is they made her flat-chested. She doesn't have any breasts showing. And they made it so she's not super muscular. But to show she was really powerful, they gave her like the biggest beard of all the, statues. It's crazy how big her beard is. So she's a really interesting pharaoh. And here is her funerary temple that she had made. And this is amazing because this was actually part of the mountain. And what they did is they cut into the mountain to make this. And then you can actually go in here and walk in there, and there's rooms. Here are people to give you a reference of size. However, before she died, they were making this. And then she decided that, maybe it wasn't such a great idea to be buried here because her stepson and other people might disturb her body because they didn't really want her ruling anyhow. So she was actually buried at another location not too far from here, and not buried in this tomb. All right, so the other thing about when the pharaohs were buried, they were mummified. So they would remove all their organs. They would take salt and stuff salt inside of them to dry them out. And then they would take a material that they had preserved or had soaked in these herbs that had these preserving qualities, and they would wrap the body in with this cloth. And it was really effective. It preserved the bodies really, really well, amazingly well. The next image I'll show you is, this is the great temple of Amun. And Amun was another ruler, and this is circa 1579 to 1075 BCE. And this is a reconstruction of the temple. And what I want to point out here, one, how complex it is and how parts of it are painted with hieroglyphics, but then also we have columns. And I want to make sure you understand that we have this trajectory of architecture that we can follow starting with the ancient Egyptians. And they have certain things that then the Greeks copy, and then the Romans copy, and the Byzantines copy, and the medieval period in Europe people copy, and then we actually still have it in our architecture. And we can trace this back to ancient Egypt. So let me look, we're going to focus in on here, and we'll look at these more closely. And here we have a drawing of the columns. So we have a row of columns here that would be called a colonnade. We have capitals on the columns, and these were carved into papyrus shapes. And papyrus is a reed that grows naturally along the Nile, and it was used for multiple things. Most notably that the the fiber inside of it was taken out and made into paper that they wrote on. But they would make pens out of it, they would weave and make baskets out of it. There were multiple uses for it. And then we have this section over here, which was an open section, no glass in it. It doesn't rain much in the desert. And it would allow ventilation into the temple, but then also light into the temple. And so we'll see these columns, the capitals, the clerestory. We'll see all of this in this trajectory of architecture that I was just talking about. So here's what it looks like today. So what they would do, you can really see these lines, that they're sections. So it has a wooden pole in the middle of it, and it's just like these giant beads that they're putting, or wheels that they're stacking one on top of another, and the weight of them holds them in place. You can see that there are hieroglyphics carved into it. Here is Horus. You can always make a Horus with the falcon head. Horus here and hieroglyphics, and these would have been painted, but over time the paint has worn off. You can see a little bit of remnants of the roof here, which would have been made out of wood, and papyrus leaves here, okay, on the capitals. So this is really important, this architecture that gets created in Egypt at this very early time period. So stop here and pick this up in our next video.